everybody decided that it's a Western, so you have to have black hats and white hats, and there have
Right.
to be the good guys and the bad guys, and they have to be very carefully drawn. And if you look at the way my dad did it, he didn't really write it like that.
All right, guys, we are back with the part two to the craziest episode of this podcast with Beau L'Amour himself. We have always been the unofficial Louis L'Amour podcast, and for this 2 weeks, I guess we are the official Louis L'Amour podcast.
Oh yeah, baby.
Back at it with another very long episode, probably rivaling one of our longest. Nathaniel, you'd know better, but two absolute action-packed episodes with Louis L'Amour, and you're about to see part two.
Yeah. Sit back. Like I said in the last episode, grab that popcorn and get ready to lock in for another incredible episode with Beau L'Amour. And like we said before, we can't thank you enough for being on this show, and we can't thank you guys enough for listening.
Yeah, enjoy.
We'll keep going.
Google comes after us.
So a lot of the talent in the 50s, 60s, and 70s grew up in the pulps. You occasionally will see somebody that was late to that because of the certain types of magazines that were around. So Stephen King actually did the same thing. He forged his talent writing short stories because horror magazine short stories lasted longer than a lot of the others.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And those people have certain ability to pack the information in. My dad's magic was, and I just finished I wouldn't call it basically a novel that is inspired by another work that my dad did. I mean, it's Louis and Beau, like No Traveler Returns, but it's not like No Traveler Returns was like a forensic recreation of a certain time in my dad's life. This is very much like, here's the thing that he and I discussed and we wanted to do with this story. It's kind of a espionage thriller type story that's set in the very early 60s.
No way.
And so I'm looking at, I was looking at recreating a lot of what was going on at that time. I don't mean just historically. I mean, like, what were the stories that were written at the time my dad and I talked about it, which would have been in the 1980s. So again, this is like Ken Follett, Frederick Forsyth, John le Carré, stuff like that. And it's 500 pages, which is about the max for anything that my dad ever wrote.
Wow.
And what was fascinating was every moment through it, and I mean, hopefully it keeps going, and there's lots of action, and there's lots of this and lots of that, and hopefully I keep the intensity up and the pace of it up. But at every moment I was writing, I was like, my dad's magic was knowing what not to write, was knowing the things not to write, and being able to just do enough so that his imagination was in partnership with the reader.
Wow.
And he would suggest things, and the reader would complete those suggestions. And I can't tell you, I don't know how many times I've dealt with fans, and they'll go, oh my God, it's like, I lived in Wyoming or someplace like this, and Louis L'Amour really knew the territory, and he really knew this, and he really knew that. And then they'd talk about a certain book, and they'd say this in that book and all this kind of stuff. And I'd like sit there and I go, I just read that, and there's nothing in there. There's nothing in there. This fan is making it up, okay? But they're making it up because Dad somehow, unconsciously, because he didn't sit there and say, oh, I'm going to figure out how to write this. I mean, he was writing from his unconscious, but trained over decades. And he knew just the words to get on the page to tell them just barely enough so that they built a beautiful picture on their own. And if he had told them more, it would have been his picture. It wouldn't have been as entertaining. Another guy that's very good at this, completely different type of author. Do you know Alan First? Got a bunch of
The name definitely rings a bell, but I
yeah,
don't know.
pre World War II kind of spy novels.
Okay.
Okay, Alan First can put you on a misty street in Paris being followed by the Gestapo in 7 words.
That's awesome.
I mean, he's great at it.
That's so cool.
It's just, it is, I don't know how to learn it. I mean, maybe I know it a little bit better than some people. I appreciate it when I read it, but so some of what you're talking about is just knowing what not to write, moving fast, having a lot of practice. Dad finished, and we've now published 250 short stories.
That's crazy.
But, he probably lost another 50 or 60.
Wow.
Okay. A lot of times he didn't have the money for carbon paper, which was how you kept a copy.
Wow.
He'd send it off to a publisher and they wouldn't do anything with it. And that was it. It was gone. Okay.
Damn.
And so, a lot of practice, a lot of just writing the things over and over and over and finding ways to make them quicker and do what he needed to do faster. He was very impressive when it came to that kind of thing. And he wrote, have you guys ever known anybody who did improv comedy?
Not personally, but I've
Okay.
definitely seen like improv
Yeah.
videos and things like that.
It's worth finding some people who do it live and just hanging out with them a little bit. Okay? Because the whole trick to this is you start with a particular premise and then everybody goes with it and they're just making it up. And it ebbs and flows, and sometimes it's funnier than it isn't, but it's happening at the spur of the moment. And the thing that you have to do is open your unconscious, basically drop your filters in order to do it. And it is hard. It is that discipline to do that is just some serious Zen voodoo discipline. And when you do it, remarkable things come out. And my dad was able to do that with writing. And I know this kind of because the way he wrote. I also know this because we talked about it a little bit. And one of the things he would say that's definitely true with improv comedy and other things, he would say, I cannot not write every day. Anytime he had a day or two where he couldn't write, he was frightened that the doors would start to close. And it would be harder and harder to open them. And I certainly know this because I tend to go in and do these big creative projects where it's all creative, and it's just me. And then it's like an audio drama or a movie or a graphic novel or something like that. And then it's 2 years of technical. And by the time I get done with the 2 years of technical, it's like getting the artistic thing back is awful. It's just, getting to the point where you can open up like that. When you watch actors work, particularly when I spent probably never wanted to be an actor, but for writing, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, I spent probably 18 years in acting classes. And like I said, I'll get back to that in a second. But what you would see a lot of times when you're seeing an actor rehearsing a part or starting to mature how they perform it, there would be a moment where all of a sudden the performance would just slow down tremendously. And other actors would kind of go, oh, he's gone up in his head. And that means he started thinking about it. And as soon as the conscious mind gets involved, there's just this lag. And, it's like you can't, oh God, I'm going to jump around like crazy and tell you all kinds of nutty stuff. There's an amazing book called The User Illusion. All right. And it's basically about consciousness. So the user illusion in early computer technology is the interface, the OS, the thing that makes it look like you have a set of controls that you can interact with, right? Rather than writing G:\\, basically writing code.
Right.
Right. And And it's a wonderful, wonderful book on consciousness. But in it, this guy said he talks about a particular soccer player that I think he interviewed, who was just an amazing, amazing player, and he missed this staggeringly easy goal because he got the ball and he got away from the pack and he was going down the field, and as he was doing it, he turned around and he looked back and he's like, "Nobody can touch me." Okay, I got this. And then he kicked the goal and he missed it. Okay.
That's a rough day.
It was because he was going, I got this. I'm thinking about what I'm doing. I'm not letting my body play it.
Yeah.
And what this writer writes a lot about in this book is the book is about physics, it's about all kinds of crazy stuff, but that the conscious mind is best used to train the unconscious mind. So if you do like martial arts and things, you go in and you do those things in a conscious manner with your trainer, with your sensei, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You do katas, you do things like this. And then the idea is that when you are actually in competition, or God forbid, you have an altercation on the street, you're free to just do these things as your unconscious wills it, because you've been trained that when you see something coming here, you do this. When you see something coming there, you do that.
Right.
And so the conscious mind is the coach for the unconscious. And you know, this again, like I said, this is something that you see in acting a lot. Now and if you read, I mean, The User Illusion's great. It's probably one of the most profound little sayings close to the front of it I ever heard. He's talking about people, how you organize information. It's a book that was written before the internet. And so it was written in a time when information was expensive rather than when information is cheap. And one of the things, you know, he says, you spend energy, you spend calories excluding information. Your senses take in something like 11 million bits of information per second. Your conscious mind can deal with 40 if you're a genius.
Wow.
Okay. Bell Laboratories decided that the perfect number was 16, not 40. And that's why we have 16-bit CDs.
Wow.
Okay, that's where 16-bit digital recording came from.
That's crazy.
But your conscious mind is moving around quickly like the beam of a flashlight in a dark room. And your brain is filtering out all of the things that are relatively useless, and you're spending lots and lots of time and energy doing it. He says, he's got this wonderful saying where he says, a method of information, he says, a mess is a method of organization that is so rich in detail that it's a mess. Okay? Basically saying your job is to limit information. You know, your job is just, and this kind of gets back to like my dad and writing and not writing too much, is just letting the important things through. And you know, as an artist, as a performer, as an athlete, whatever you are, a lot of your job is limiting the amount of information that you're reacting to, and only reacting in the most trained and evolved way possible to the primo information. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'll tell you a little bit about acting. I learned to write in acting class. I learned a lot from my dad, and I was surrounded by writers. I mean, everybody from like the freakishly dark Jim Thompson to like Ray Bradbury, who was just like who was like an angel. He wrote angelic material, and he was a sweet man. But cool. I learned to write in acting class, and a lot of it I wanted to learn to act, to learn what my customers. I wanted to be screenwriter or playwright, things like that. And I wanted to learn what my customers needed from me. And so my customer in this case would be the actor. And you learn that you have to, if you're writing prose, if you're writing fiction, and you guys do both, so this will be interesting. If you're writing fiction and you're doing dialogue, you got a dialogue scene. You only really want to write the high points of the dialogue. If you write every single line, it's going to get boring. Okay, so you're going to put some description in there, or you're just going to make some jumps, or you're going to do whatever to not do every single line. But an actor, now, God knows the actor doesn't need more lines than they need. Okay, but an actor needs the lines that will stair-step them emotionally to the points where they need to get. Okay, you can start out at a certain line, and as a writer, you're saying, I need to get this guy here, but I can't get him here in 2 dialogue interactions. I'm actually going to need a couple more to get the intensity to the point where I can let him go. I can let him do what he needs to do.
Right.
And so it's like a ladder, and if every rung isn't there, the actor will not be able to make the transition from one rung to the next so easily, and it will show in the performance.
That's really cool.
And so the writing gets harder, but the scenes get better if you add other characters. So a 2-person scene is easy to act and easy to write. A 3-4-person scene, 5-person scene gets harder and harder because everybody's interacting. But the amazing thing is, if you have 2 people, person 1 says, okay, I've got this fact, and person 2 says, I've got this thing, or I've got this opinion, and it goes up and up and up and up, and they can only go as far as the next person can take them. But if you've got a 3rd person, they can jump a couple of rungs. They can get there before either one of the other 2 would do it on their own. And it pushes the whole thing that much higher. And then if you've got more coming in and more coming in, when I did the audio play of Murano of the Dry Country, pretty much right in the middle of that, there is kind of an action dialogue argument scene. I mean, it's basically, it starts off with just a couple of people kind of riding up to a ranch, and then more and more people kind of join in, and it becomes more of an argument. It ends up being a shootout. And there's 7 people all going off at each other in that scene. And I'm not going to put myself here as some kind of like paragon of great writing, but I got to tell you, that's exciting. When everybody's got a point of view, okay, and it's very clear, and everybody's got a place they're coming from, and they all start interacting at that kind of pace. You've got a very intense scene. I mean, the guy who's great at this sort of thing. You don't see all that many big, complicated scenes in film. I was just watching the Dune movies, and I was surprised how few long, carefully constructed, intense interaction building scenes there were in it. But the place where you see it is Quentin Tarantino. Okay, Tarantino does these big theatrical, and by theatrical I mean like you could see him on stage.
Yeah, like
and they build and they build, and everybody's got their own point of view, and there's usually multiple people in them, and different people set off different qualities in other people, and it's really remarkable. So acting, knowing what the actor needed motivationally to go from one place to another was really important. And then miraculously, right at this time, the audio publishing business started. Random House, or it wasn't Random House in those days, it was Bantam, decided they wanted to do these dramatized audios.
Very cool.
And I got involved in that particular thing. They wanted to experiment with my dad's stuff because they always knew that they wouldn't get too screwed by anything they experimented with Louis because he was so popular.
That's really cool.
So they'd have a chance to do a few without them completely failing and kind of learn what they were doing. And we did a couple, and we were sort of like, these performances aren't really out. Dad was sort of like, he was like, I don't like these actors. You got to go, you're the one in the family who knows about the recording business. You're the one in the family who knows about writing and directing and all this kind of stuff. Go to New York, find out what's going on. And I went to New York, and so you'll figure out how I learned some of this stuff here in just a second. I went to New York, and I sat in on a couple of productions. And I'm like, these are great actors. These guys are performing on Broadway every night.
Wow.
They do our stuff. They do commercials. They do Broadway. They're top actors. So what was wrong? Well, what was wrong was Bantam was transcribing short stories into scripts. And you can't play fiction prose.
Yeah.
It doesn't play worth a shit. I mean, I've read a couple of things that would play. Okay. Famously, The Maltese Falcon played. Okay. The book kind of became the script without too much screenwriting.
Wow. That's really cool.
Every once in a while, there's something. I personally think, even though I'm not the least bit impressed with Stephen King screenplays, he writes great scenes that I think you could turn into film without too much adaptation. But most writers, my dad definitely included, he knew what not to write. He didn't write enough to give you a fully fleshed scene. And so the actors weren't getting those stair steps. And I came back and I started writing scripts, and I hired other writers, and we all started writing scripts. And then I would take finished stuff that I had written or they had written under my supervision, take that script to New York, audition 60 to 80 people on it, okay, and then perform it. So I was doing that 6 times a year. Yeah. And when you go into an audition with a script that you have either written or you have supervised, so you know it really, really well, and 40 actors do it and they suck, it's not them, it's you. Okay? And it's sort of like, it's not them. And if you go in there and 40 actors kick ass, it's you. Because
so cool.
This is an audition. They're reading cold. They do a little bit of study before they came in there. There's no director really helping them out with it or anything. It's not highly evolved. So it was an incredible training ground.
Yeah.
It was really, really, really amazing. And I would say the more access to drama, the more access to actors, the more access to auditions, and being willing to say, I can fix that performance in the writing. Okay. And you see it. I mean, I'm not talking it's a perfect performance when you see somebody nail it, but most of it's there.
Yeah.
Then that's you. Okay. And there's very few people who can really charm a performance. I've seen a couple. I've worked with a couple. Tom Selleck, you can give him anything. He's just totally charming. He doesn't, if you give a great actor a terrible script, and they try to work it like they're going to act every line, like they're going to play every single piece of emotional information they can find in it, and it's a sucky script, they're terrible. Watch Robert De Niro when he gets something like that. There's all this mugging and this giant plastic face starts going up and down and doing weird stuff. It's crazy. And so there are charmers out there, but hopefully you kind of know who they are and what they're doing. And if you're auditioning people, you see so many people that you know who's the charmer and who isn't. But drama will teach you a lot. Acting will teach you a lot, just about character motivations and what to do with things. And I'm saying all this, and I'm going to say, and I just had this huge experience writing a giant fiction novel,
Yeah.
and it was wonderful to get away from the absolutely strict, like to use that when I wanted to, okay, but not have to be like, oh my God, I just got to sweat bullets over this scene and whether it'll play or not. You
Yeah.
know, so it's wonderful to have a mixture of qualities in that.
Yeah, the worlds are totally different of like screenwriting and prose writing for sure. To your point, you can't just like copy and paste an idea. Really, you have to rework it for that medium.
They are very different, and they shouldn't be the same. And it's kind of miraculous and wonderful if they are occasionally. You know,
Yeah.
have you guys seen The English Patient?
No.
Okay,
Oh yeah, I
so
don't think I saw that one, but I know what you're talking about. Yep.
it's era wise, it's like totally up your alley. Content wise, it's kind of 50-50.
Okay.
But if you want to experience just deal with a fantastic adaptation experience, see The English Patient, then read the Michael Ondaatje novel, and then do you know who Walter Murch is?
No,
think so.
it sounds super familiar, but
I, I got this big shit-eating grin on my face. You can't see me, but I'm grinning. Um, Walter Murch is the only guy who has ever won 2 Academy Awards for editing on the same movie twice. Okay, so Walter Murch won picture and sound editing, I believe, on Apocalypse Now.
Okay.
And he is the reason Apocalypse Now is Apocalypse Now. Okay, I mean, he is in my opinion, he is the true constructor of that. And he also won those 2 awards on The English Patient.
wow.
And so there's the movie The English Patient. Um, there is the book The English Patient. And then there is a book that was put together by Michael Ondaatje, the novelist, and Walter Murch. Let's call him the final writer, okay, of The English Patient, talking about their experience. And if you saw The English Patient and then you read the novel, or vice versa, like 5 years apart, you would go, "Oh, this is a great adaptation. This is exactly like the book," because it captures the quality of it beautifully. And then when you compare the two, like scene to scene, they are nothing like one another. They couldn't be more different. And yet, Michael Ondaatje loved the movie. And it's a really, really interesting experience in like what happens in an adaptation, what can happen in an adaptation, and then to listen to the novelist and the film editor talk about that experience just
crazy.
freaking rocks. Okay,
That
so
is super cool.
the
That they did
Michael
that.
Ondaatje, Walter Murch book, I believe, is called The Conversations. And it's a big kind of expensive picture book. It's got a lot of photography from
Yeah.
the movie in it.
That's too
So
cool.
it's worth it.
But yeah, it's a very, very interesting kind of experience when you see those 2 things. And then if you really want to blow your mind, okay,
Sign me up.
read The Lost Oasis by Saul Kelly,
Okay.
which is about the actual events that had to do with the Saharan mapping expeditions, which is what The English Patient is about. Okay. And then read Killing Rommel by Stephen Pressfield, which is
Yeah.
about the same characters. Just a few years later, the International Saharan Mapping Group operated right before the war. And then when the war started, they all went off, and some of them fought with the Italians, and some of them fought with the British, and some of them fought with the Germans. And there were weirdos like Count Almashi, who's one of the main characters of The English Patient, who kind of did a number of different things. And the fascinating thing was it was this gigantic game of chess in the desert because they all knew what the other ones knew. It was the Sahara, and it was huge, and it was Rommel, and it was Montgomery, and everybody was trying to outmaneuver everybody else. And their guides, the Europeans that knew the Sahara, all knew one another really well. And
That's interesting.
so there's like a whole universe of
Yeah, there's
stories
like
kind
a
of
whole
about the same
multiverse
thing there.
of the English patient.
Yeah,
That's
that's
sweet.
crazy.
So I have a question kind of based on that kind of conversation. I don't think Louis L'Amour was ever happy with one of his adaptations, correct? Is that, to start with that assumption?
Yeah, I think he was. I think he was happy with Hondo,
Okay.
given the realities of what was going on at the time. In other words, for the time period, it was a pretty good movie,
Hmm.
and it also did things that he liked it when people stretched and tried different things. And Hondo was one of the first real serious, like crazy location movies shot in 3D.
Mm.
And I mean, I'll come back to that in a minute, but I mean, it just took huge balls the size of bowling balls to shoot a 3D movie the way that film was shot.
I didn't even know that it was shot in 3D.
It was okay. So I'll tell you about it now.
Yeah, let's hear that. That's
It was
wild. We'll come back to
so John Wayne. So the whole story. So the story of Honda is kind of fascinating. Okay, so here you guys got time for this? You ready for this?
it. We got time.
Of course.
Okay, very okay. So the pulp magazines were failing. My dad wrote this story called Gift of Cochise that he sent to Leo Margulies, his buddy at Standard Magazines, which was the main pulp magazine publisher. Leo didn't buy it. And Dad had an agent who was kind of good for nothing and kind of a sleazeball who didn't, who sometimes would publish stuff and then like not tell the author and keep the money
Ooh.
and stuff like that. I mean, he was a creep.
Yeah, you don't want that.
And he had not been any good for my dad. He hadn't sold anything in my dad's, like I think ever. But Dad was impressed with him because he knew everyone in the literary world.
Mhm.
And he sent him Gift of Cochise and said, see what you can do with this, because my contacts couldn't do anything with it. And times were so bad, this would have been like 52, or it would be a little bit before that, because in response to this, Leo gave my dad a chance to write the last 4 Hopalong Cassidy stories to kind of try to hold him over and keep him together financially. And it only slightly worked. He made barely enough money off those books to get by. And Dad was in such hard. He was living in a 10 by 10 apartment in the back of a flat in, kind of south of Hollywood, and back of someone else's flat. He would go to the park in the morning and sit in the park in the morning, so that his landlady wouldn't know that he didn't have money for breakfast.
Oh man.
Because he was afraid she would like throw him out if she knew he was out of money. And the agent sold Gift of Cochise to Collier's. So Slick magazine, multiple times the money that a pulp would be. Now, still,
Wow.
this was $600.
Right.
Okay, instead of $200, it was $600. And the problem with the Slicks was that they always wanted to create like the perfect magazine. So they would hold your story until they had like the perfect group of stories to go with it. Mm-hmm. And they didn't pay you. The pulps paid the second they bought the second they said they wanted your story.
Yeah.
The Slicks didn't pay until they published.
Ooh.
All right. So he sold it, but he didn't have any money, and it was out there, but it got enough attention so that an old Western actor, like almost from the silent era, optioned it. And weirdly, he lived like a block from where I live now. He lived right up my street.
That's crazy.
He had it. And he never did anything with it, but he was a friend of John Wayne's. And when the option lapsed, Wayne bought it. And as soon as Wayne bought it, and I shouldn't say he bought it, he optioned it. So an option is like the film company will rent your story for a certain number of months to see if they can get the money, get the talent, get everybody together. If they don't get it together, then they just return the rights to you. but they give you a certain amount of money. Usually it's 10% of the purchase price. And so Dad had a little bit of money to play with, and he jumped on a plane for New York with a briefcase full of manuscripts, and he freaking imposed himself on every editor he could find. Okay? I've got some Westerns. I'm going to be a hot writer. I've got a John Wayne movie coming out.
Dude, no way.
Really need to appreciate me. This is how Louis became a Western writer. I mean,
What
he
a
had
guy.
written some Westerns. Okay, but this is how he became the Western novelist that everybody knew from the mid 50s on.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's like, I'm going to be something, and just stuck manuscripts in front of people. He sold 4 novels on that trip.
Wow.
Wow.
And okay, so one of them's Hondo. It isn't even out yet, and he's already making hay on it, which was great.
That's too
Um,
good.
Hondo was bought by Wayne. It was produced by his company. They got this wild idea that they were going to go down to Mexico, to Durango, Mexico, which was a place where a lot of Westerns were made, and they wanted to do it in 3D. And this is not something that had been done too often. There had been 3D movies out, but they were generally made under relatively controlled circumstances.
Yeah, I imagine.
They hired John Farrow, who was an Australian poet and novelist, and the father of Mia Farrow,
Wow.
okay, to direct it.
Wow.
And one of the things that John Farrow didn't like in a Western was water trucks. He didn't like everything being wetted down in between takes. He wanted dust. Okay. And so one of the things you'll notice if you see Hondo is, compared to a lot of other Westerns, it's kind of dusty. I won't tell you it's like crazy Ridley Scott. I want to see the air in every scene, blowing pollen, blowing dust, whipping banners. Okay. But there's a fair amount of dust. And every 3D camera is 2 cameras. And so if you get dust problems, like in the gate of your camera, you've got double the dust problems.
No.
Right? On top of it, 3D, I really wish we had picture here because I'd kind of show you. 3D cameras have to be angled or aimed at the point, at a particular point to get the effect. It isn't just 2 cameras shooting side by side. They are converged, and convergence in 3D is a big deal. And since they were in Durango, Mexico, they had to wait 4 days to find out if anything was working. Every day was 4 days delayed, because they not only had all of your normal dust in the gate, focus, any other problem that you might have on a movie, but they had this convergence issue. And so these guys were crazy. I mean, if you talk to a modern guy that works in 3D and you go, yeah, I'm going to go out into the middle of nowhere and shoot a 3D movie on film with dust, okay, and wait, and basically the fastest they can deliver dailies is 4 days.
Yikes.
They're just like, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
You
That is
know?
crazy.
Yeah, so it was kind of a remarkable movie. It was good. I'll tell you another little interesting secret behind it that also has a Louis L'Amour, long-term Louis L'Amour trajectory. The original lady that John Wayne wanted to cast was Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn at the time decided that she could not possibly work with John Wayne because of his attitude regarding the communists in Hollywood, the Hollywood 10,
Wow.
all of that kind of McCarthy era stuff, and she was just it was crazy, impossible. And I actually think Wayne was smart enough to know that he wanted to leverage some of that, because he wanted this woman to have a tude. He eventually got it with Geraldine Page, but that's what he was after. Well, a few years later, my mom and dad met Katharine Hepburn at George Cukor's house, and they became slightly friendly.
That's so
And,
cool.
and she and my dad talked, my dad would say, "Oh, I'd love to have you in a movie." I don't know if he knew about the Hondo thing or not. I found that out through research. I don't know that through the family.
Wow.
Maybe he knew about that, but and they kind of traded story ideas. He would send her something, and eventually he sent her a novel and said, maybe this thing could become a movie. And she wrote him back this amazing letter where she basically, I don't know what was up with Katharine Hepburn, like sexually. She was definitely in love with Spencer Tracy and things like this, but there's other stories. And she she wrote back this amazing letter that says, the kind of Western I want to do, I want to be the cowboy. I want to be the person that like rides in on the horse and like saves the girl and like all. I mean, she's like saying it's like this remarkably candid, unbelievable letter.
Wow.
And my dad obviously read it, and a couple of years later, he wrote Kiowa Trail with a pretty kind of hard charging cowboy woman who's a little scary.
Wow.
Okay. And I mean, I have fans write occasionally, she doesn't really end the story being quite as hard as she is in the beginning, but I get letters from fans. It's like, what's up with, note this, Kate Lundy, the character in that story. It's like, what's up with her? She's scary. She's something else. Well, I'm pretty certain that my dad wrote Kate Lundy for Katharine Hepburn. At the time that happened, Katharine Hepburn had kind of retired to take care of Spencer Tracy, who was very sick. And quite a few years later, my dad got an offer to write a screenplay or rewrite a screenplay. It was the troubled third installment in the Rooster Cogburn series.
Oh, nice.
Okay. And it was Katharine Hepburn. She had done so Wayne had done True Grit. Then they made a sequel, Rooster Cogburn or Rooster Cogburn and the Lady, which was John Wayne and Katharine Hepburn. And surprise, surprise, the two of them got along really, really, really well. Okay. Now they were senior citizens by this time,
Right.
and there was a lot of water under the bridge. And if there's one thing that Katharine Hepburn loved being around, I'm sure it's why she liked my dad, is she loved strong men. Okay. Like I said, she was an odd character. I don't know what was up there, but she definitely liked strong guys. She decided she loved John Wayne, and she wanted to do another movie with him immediately. And my dad ultimately, he didn't do it. He was sort of like, I don't want to take on somebody else's troubled screenplay, and I'm a novelist, and this is basically a sequel. True Grit was a novel, and then there was a sequel made that had nothing to do with the novel. And this is like the third sequel that had nothing to do with the novel. It's kind of like, no, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But anyway, there's this whole Katharine Hepburn trajectory through our lives from like the 1950s to like almost the mid 70s.
That's
Too
a cool
wild.
backstory right there. That's awesome.
So, did you meet her then?
I've met her a couple of times, yeah.
And John Wayne too?
No, I don't think my dad never met John Wayne.
That's crazy. That's crazy that he starred in a Louis L'Amour movie, but your dad never met him. But
No, novelists aren't really welcome in Hollywood that much.
It's usually get off the set type of situation.
They certainly aren't going to invite you to the set. I mean,
Yeah.
a screenwriter very often isn't wanted on the set.
wow.
And I've been in a number of situations where particularly directors don't really like the writer around. And, I had an experience where I was able to write a movie and actually be there and be a producer on it, and that's kind of remarkable unless you're in series television where the writer is king.
Huh.
Yeah.
So, but I listened to and now this may not be true, but I listened to Tom Selleck's memoir, and it sounded like he and Louis and Sam Elliott were all really good friends.
Yeah, I would say pretty good friends. I mean, not super best buddies. That was a pretty tight circle. But So here's some interesting stuff.
Tell me more.
I think
So
I think I was the person that got Sam Elliott the job in the Sacketts.
nice.
I didn't
Let's go.
I didn't remember this, but there was I was reading through my dad's journal, and I hit this thing where it's like, Beau keeps insisting, and I was like, I don't know, I was like 16. Okay, it's like Beau keeps insisting that there's this actor that everybody ought to, and I called up Doug Netter, the producer, and I said, I don't know anything about this, but my son basically says you need to see this movie Lifeguard. Okay,
Yeah.
and check out Sam Elliott. And I don't think I realized it at the time, but Sam Elliott is in that first scene in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Oh wow.
Huh.
He's in the poker scene in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which is also interesting because that's I don't know if that's the first place he ever met his wife, but but anyway, so we knew them pretty well. I mean, Sam and Tom were great casting and great brothers because they're very different characters.
Yeah.
There's a real kind of darkness and intensity to Sam, and Tom is very, he is light. His happy personality, and they're so they made good. It's if you're going to have characters, it's wonderful, particularly if you have characters who are going in the same direction. If you want good scenes, for the characters that are headed in the same direction, you want them to have incredibly different ways of approaching things. So that way they can be headed in the same direction, but they can still have conflict.
Right.
Well, that's awesome.
And so that was really good. That was really good casting. But yeah, we knew those guys pretty well. I knew Steve McQueen fairly well in the latter days of his life. He did a lot of the research for Tom Horn at our house.
Wow, that's really cool.
Wild.
Yeah, and he and my dad were he was not an easy person to get along with. The feeling that I get earlier in his life.
Yeah.
And everybody was on their best behavior with my dad. I think everybody wanted to impress him.
That's so
I think
cool.
everybody recognized that, he'd probably killed people that were wider between the eyes than they were between the shoulders. I'm sort of joking, but it's, they knew he was a pretty tough guy who was like a really, really nice person.
Yeah.
And so he had a mollifying effect on people, but Steve was very, very good. I think most of his wild days were earlier in his life, and he had a background like my dad, kind of Navy, boxing, stuff of that sort. I think I met Sean Connery once for a moment. A lot of charisma, that there's sometimes you meet actors and it's like there's nothing there. And sometimes they're great actors, and that's what it is. I mean, I think I spent a little bit of time. I never met him, like hi, shake your hand or anything like that. But I spent a little bit of time in like the same room as Al Pacino, and that was like one of those like not there,
Right.
And you just feel like this is a chameleon who can kind of become anything they need to become.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is what's so cool about your father's legacy is like you just listed off some of the most classic actors of all time, and the common thread between all of them is Louis L'Amour. It's just like he is the foundation that this genre and so much of Hollywood is built on. It's insane. It's so cool.
I briefly worked with Burt Reynolds.
Very cool.
And I'm trying to think who else was interesting. I mean, when it comes to interesting people, okay, those that I've met, those are not the interesting people. Okay. I don't mean I met and I shook his hand. I mean, I met and I hung out with Edward Teller. You know who that is? The hydrogen bomb.
Wow.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I mean, my dad had some
that's wild.
fascinating connections. I did
That's
a
so cool.
lot. I did a lot of work with on the very earliest versions of this book that I just finished.
Mhm.
I did a lot of work with Thomas Paine, who was head of NASA during Apollo.
Wow.
Jeez.
And
Yeah.
there's a whole aspect of dealing with submarines in this book. And Tom had been an engineering officer on subs during World War
So
II,
cool.
and kind of in his retirement, I mean, you can kind of see this like submarine engineer goes on to like space flight, you know.
Hmm.
And he had this amazing library. He was trying to collect every single work in the world that had anything to do with submarines.
Wow.
And
Well, that's
a
crazy.
friend of mine that I knew through film school and cars, you know, just car racing and shit like that. Who, he was working for Tom, and so I met Tom and thought this whole thing was terrific. And then I actually introduced Tom to my dad because Tom wanted to get Dad involved with the Ronald Reagan, the President's Commission on Space.
Wow.
And so yeah, there've been some interesting, you know, some interesting people. I sat around. I'm trying to remember. Um, I'm spacing on some names, so I can't really drop as many names as I would like
You're
to.
good. I mean, you've
But I
already
remember.
blown us away with what you've dropped.
So
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, to circle back to the question about the movie, and I know you can't answer like for your dad, so you can answer for yourself on this.
Mhm.
Like, what do you feel was either missing or was focused on that should not have been focused on from those adaptations of his work? And like, what would it take to get that English patient type treatment where you felt like, oh,
Oh my
that's an
God.
actual
Okay, so
adaptation?
you just asked like the deadly question. Um,
Oops.
so there is something about my dad's work that screws up adaptations.
Yeah.
Okay, I would have to say, you know, like my dad, for its time, I like Conager. Um, uh, the Sackets is kind of goofy, but its casting is so remarkable. Okay, I mean, I'm going to get to answer your question in just a second. I'm going to give a couple
Take your
the
time.
things I want to say things I liked first.
Yeah.
Um, the casting is so remarkable because I mean, it starts with Gilbert Rowlands, who started making films in silent films.
Wow.
Okay, and goes up through Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott, and it basically had like a whole smattering of like all kinds of people that had made the Western genre what they were for like 50 years
It's too cool.
in that one movie. And you know, there's people who like it for all kinds of other reasons, and there's great chemistry between the brothers, and there's all these various things. But you know, is it great? It's not that great, but it was something really remarkable in kind of like film history, just to have all those people in one movie. So that's an interesting thing. Conager, a film that Sam Elliott made somewhat later on, is very, and this leads perfectly into the answer to the rest of this. Conager is a wonderful little movie because it's just kind of quiet, and it doesn't like fall into like all kinds of Western stereotypes and silliness and gunfighters and I'm faster than you are and all this kind of crap that you see. I mean, listen, if you want to do story, a movie, whatever it is, that kind of plays around with the stereotypes of the West, like the spaghetti westerns. You know, it's totally appropriate. If you want to mess around, you know, if you're doing a Western movie that's about Western movies or about the Western genre, like Silverado, it's more about the Western genre than it is about the West. Okay, and it's beautiful that way. Great. The problem is that these tropes in westerns get loose and they percolate in all kinds of places out of control where they start sabotaging the work because people don't know to take them seriously or not to take them seriously, or are they making a serious movie or are they not making a serious movie? You know, it's like this is I mean, a lot of this has to do with control of the genre. Are you really, 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 do you know the pieces of the genre? And can you control it like what I was saying about Sam Peckinpah and the Wild Bunch earlier? Somebody who understood the genre and where it was at the time so well that he made an entire movie about something that he never spoke about, that no one ever said a word about. Okay? And so, you know, again, Lawrence Kasdan, Silverado, great control, you know, of exactly what he wanted to say about the genre. And, you know, he wasn't trying to do historical accuracy. So you can choose that or you can not choose that, but you need to know which one you're choosing, or you need to know the definition of what you're choosing to do it really well. And so there's an interesting thing about Conacher. Sam was very involved with that production, and it was, I mean, he produced it. He optioned the story from my dad. He was very hands-on, and he happened to get the best book. Conacher has no Western stuff that's out of line in it. Okay, it's very focused. It's a really nice, quiet little book, and you know, I mean, a lot of it's about a woman who's so lonely she's tying notes to tumbleweeds. Okay, it's that kind of story. My dad didn't do that too often. A lot of it was like, you know, we're gonna find the gold. We're gonna do this. We're gonna drive the cattle to Canada. You know, big, sweeping, exciting things. So this is a very contained little story. Sam got his hands on that. They adapted the book quite religiously, and because it was the story it worked beautifully. Unfortunately, then he and a number of other people were like, no, you just do the book. And that doesn't work in everything. You have to go through things and you have to say, okay, so what are we going to do? How are we going to, what are we going to set aside? What are we going to focus on? And so I think a lot of the thing that goes wrong is people lose control of the genre. I've seen, this is a film I can kind of talk about because it didn't get made. I won't be insulting anybody. The Empty Land was a story that was optioned quite some time ago by a couple of different people, and initially, in the first time it was made, I was involved as a producer, and we went into the network with it, and they said, what do you want to, what do you think we're doing here? And I kind of laid it out, and I said, I said, we want to get a script before you hire any talent. So please, let's just get a first draft. I don't want to talk about anybody. And let's just say the executive immediately went out and had a conversation with a particular cowboy star. And then everything had to be about that particular cowboy star.
Yeah.
And the problem with The Empty Land is that it's about a situation. There isn't really a bad guy in it. And everybody decided that it's a Western, so you have to have black hats and white hats, and there have to be the good guys and the bad guys, and they have to be very carefully drawn. And if you look at the way my dad did it, he didn't really write it like that. In fact, he dedicated it to his father, okay, and made a comment about him understanding what it meant to wear the badge. So my grandfather had been a town constable, but the other part that my dad was referencing there was the fact that he'd also been like on the county board of supervisors, and he knew like the politician and the policeman role. And the two characters in this story that really make the dynamics of the story are a politician and a policeman, a town taming marshal who in kind of wonderful contrast to what you'd expect, only barely wants to tame this town. He's sort of like, you keep the lid on until the gold rush is over, then everything collapses and it all goes away, and I don't care beyond that. And then there's this other guy who's the town councilman, and he's a mine owner, and he says, no, this is my home. I have to turn this into something. So now you've got these two guys going in the same direction, like what I was talking about earlier, but they've got totally different ways of dealing with it. Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily have a good guy and like a villain. You have these two basically good guys who are trying to turn this town into something that isn't just like the murder capital of Nevada, but they're completely opposed to it. So if you want to cast this well, all right, it's like back in those days, Sam Elliott and Ray Liotta, okay, or I'm trying to remember the name of the other guy I'm thinking of. Or maybe it'll come to me in a minute. But a really, really powerful, unexpected actor for James Woods. Okay? Like, can you imagine Sam Elliott and James Woods in the same movie, like chewing the same scenery?
Yeah, you watch.
Okay? And they want the same thing, but they freaking hate each other. All right. So there's a great dynamic there. But anyway, as soon as Cowboy Star was hired, mm-hmm. nobody would even believe the other character existed.
Yeah.
Because these movies are about one good guy and one bad guy.
Yeah.
All right.
Shifts the whole thing.
Yeah, and so it's a nuanced view of what you're looking at. And there's almost always stuff that you want to move out of my dad's stories, like one or two little details that often, and the problem is because he wrote so briefly, they're more like ideas that kind of percolate in somebody's mind. Mm. And they may not even be such like a huge thing in the story, but there are these like kernels of ideas that kind of start populating the person until they kind of take over the story. So you have to be kind of careful. It's wonderful when you see. I had lunch with one of the guys who produced The Revenant the other day, and we were talking about that, and I was just like, you had like a wonderful Western to do, because of the era, everybody involved knows they don't know anything. And so they can fall back and learn it from the ground up. They can say, well, what was it like here in like 1820 or whenever it was, mm-hmm. And what were the Native Americans doing and what were the costumes like? And it isn't people sort of taking, just imagining. I was talking to another guy about a thing the other day, and a particular costume that was going to show up in a Western. And it was, they were talking about a relatively large pistol, let's say, like Dragoon Colt, Walker Colt size. And a guy wearing it in a gun belt. Dragoons and Walkers were not traditionally worn in gun belts. They were pretty heavy for that. They were generally worn on a saddle. Either side of the saddle was kind of typical for that. It's not that people didn't belt carry them, okay? But, and there's this whole thing about kind of fast draw and everything. I'm like, dude, this thing is enormous. It's as long as your forearm, okay? And if you're gonna put it on the guy, cross draw, okay? So you can get it out. Because if you've got it tied, if you've got it belted tightly around your waist so that it doesn't get away from you while you're riding a horse or something like that, you can't raise your elbow high enough.
Yeah, that's
okay. To get just deal. I'm going to go through a couple of these things. So the reason you see guys wearing guns cross draw is because they were big, and because that's a way you can get it out when you're seated.
Yeah,
really smart.
Okay. If you notice, like, a famous character like this, you look at the way that Wild Bill Hickok wore guns. Okay, so Navy Colts in a sash reversed. Okay, so he could get either hand to the gun, okay, seated. And and I'm also going to say, this is the only person, as far as I know, who ever had a meet me in the street gunfight in the real West. And it wasn't in the real West, it was in Illinois. Okay. Now, this isn't to say there weren't all kinds of wild gunfights, okay, and things like that. But that sort of thing, like, okay, we're going to meet at noon, at high noon in the street. It's like this one event, okay, that Hickok had was turned into every street shootout in every Western there's ever been. But it was because he was famous. It was because he was famous. It was a conflict that he'd had with a gambler about a watch. The guy had won the watch, and they'd been like teasing one another, and things got out of control. And ultimately, it was like, we're going to meet in the town square, and you're going to give me my watch, and it was a relatively long range, relatively slowly paced shootout. But so far as I know, historically, there may have been a couple others that I'm not like the greatest historian, I'll admit that, but there may have been a couple others, but this is it. This is the one.
Yeah.
At the same
archetype,
time,
the start of it all.
absolutely. And at the same time, I mean, if you want to know, you take the same guy in a similar situation, okay? This is how crazy gunfights could get. He was backed into a house by people, like a girlfriend's house or something like this, and it wasn't in the super far West either, and had gotten into a dispute about somebody, and he ran out of ammo, and he ended up shooting a ramrod, shooting a guy with a ramrod.
No way.
So he basically loaded powder into that chamber, okay, capped it, and out of ball, okay, shot the ramrod down the barrel and shot the guy with the ramrod.
Dude.
Okay?
Hopefully that was the last guy.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a fraught situation.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think so.
there's a lot of dueling out west with knives, probably more common than guns.
Right.
It's crazy.
And
So freaking long to live.
for dueling, for we're going to fight this out kind of
Right,
thing,
right.
not we're in the middle of something. If you see the movie, I'm going all over the place telling you all kinds of Western stuff. If you want me to stop, tell me.
Never.
I'm just like riffing from one thing to another. If you see and I think this is based on a true event. If you see the Kevin Costner Wyatt Earp movie,
I haven't seen that.
there's two wonderful gunfight things that are just so real. It's unbelievable in it. One of them is he's young and in the West for the first time, and there's this dispute that breaks out in a saloon, and the two guys kind of fall out the door, kind of punching each other and struggling and everything. And one of the guys starts to realize that he's losing the fist fight, and he pulls his gun and shoots the other guy. Okay, that's like a real Wild West gunfight. Okay. And there's also another wonderful one in there that I think is a historical thing, where the guy pulls a gun on him and he throws a billiard ball and knocks the guy out with a billiard ball.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's that kind of craziness. Have you ever seen the N.C. Wyeth painting, The Gunfight, with these guys at the bar?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so if you're into this, look at like the great old Western artists from like the 1880s to like the 1920s.
Sold.
So N.C. Wyeth, Frank Schoonover, there's a bunch of these guys.
Uh-huh.
A lot of them what they called the Brandywine School of Art. And this is a bunch of guys standing at a bar, but it's like the middle of the action, and sort of like one guy has pushed another guy, that guy is is like ramming into somebody else, leaning over his shoulder with a pistol and like shooting the guy behind him in the foot. Okay. And it's like, I have always looked at that and I was like, yeah, that's chaos. That's a gunfight.
Yeah.
Okay? It's like, that's emotions got the better of people. And it's like all the dirtiness, happen. I mean, I love using stuff like that in this book that I just finished. I have a scene where a guy comes to the door of a hotel room, and somebody's trying to get his attention, and he opens the door, and then he realizes it's a trap. Okay, and he tries to slam the door, and somebody like shoves their arm through, and they've got a pistol in the arm, and he's got this. You guys are gonna love this.
I'm
He's
loving
got
it already.
yeah, he's got this like CIA kind of, or OSS kind of like spike thing up his sleeve. It's just like it's like an ice pick. Okay, and he like rips that out of his sleeve, and he like rams. He's trying to hold the door shut. There's all these people pounding on the door. And, you know, he like stabs back, but he doesn't hit the guy's hand. He hits the gun, and the gun drops, and the ice pick goes away. And then they push the door open, and he goes back up against a couch, and he like grabs an ashtray, and he like bashes the guy over the head. And they end up kind of like falling over the couch, and he grabs somebody else and like throws them to the back of the room. And it's sort of like, this is like, you know who's great at this? You want a filmmaker who's great at this? Peter Berg.
Okay, yeah.
Have you ever seen The Kingdom?
Yeah, is that George Clooney? Is that the one?
No. This is Jamie Foxx, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
I can picture it. I just haven't seen it.
Me too.
It's on the list.
Yeah, and what's her name? Who was in Alias? The gal who was the I can't remember. She used to be married to Ben Affleck. Anyway, there is a scene where this gal, the FBI agent, investigating a crime like the Khobar Towers bombing, except this is in Saudi Arabia. So she's an American FBI agent. There are a group of American FBI agents over there, and these terrorists are in this building, and to mask where they are, they have made the entry to their place on a particular floor, but then they have jackhammered a hole in the floor, and they're actually like one floor down.
Nice.
Okay, and she falls into this hole or jumps down into this hole, and there's a guy. It's where they were holding a hostage, and there's this guy in the room, and she and the guy go at it in like this 8-foot concrete box. Okay, and I mean, it's like knives stabbing into feet. The guy picks her up she's wearing like a plate vest, plate armor vest, and he picks her up by like the crotch and the neck, okay, and has her over his head and is slamming her against the wall.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody does this stuff like Peter Berg.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
cool.
He is absolute wild man when it comes to this stuff, but it's sort of like, that's a fracas.
Right.
Okay.
That's a good word for it.
that is an incredible presentation, of that kind of stuff. Anyway, I think the point that we were talking about was, things that kind of go wrong in Westerns. I'll give you another one. I edited a Western magazine for a while. So we had Louis L'Amour's Western magazine, except we only published one Louis L'Amour story. So most of them were the idea was to find new Western talent. And I remember getting a story when we were publishing that magazine, and it was a character rode up. So it's out on the plains, middle of nowhere. Character rides up to a place where there's a dugout. All right, and then they come to the dugout, and the author describes the door to the dugout as a single piece of fresh cut pine, still oozing sap. I'm sitting here going, why do you build a dugout? Because there's no trees. You're telling me there's a 3-foot diameter pine.
Yeah, that was
right?
big boy.
Okay. It's like the problem with Westerns that you don't have in a lot of other genres is, for some reason, people think they know, or people just their intelligence goes on hold. They sort of like, well, I can write, I'm just going to write this. This is the thing that came out. It's like, well, okay, but why does that why does that make sense?
Right.
You know, it doesn't make sense. And, you know, and then you kind of get to there was another one where it was kind of like somebody was putting stuff in a trunk, and it was like books and this and that and a saddle in the trunk, and closes up the trunk and picks up the trunk. I'm sorry, that's an 80-pound trunk at this point.
Yeah.
It's like, a saddle? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, seriously.
That's a good
So
point. There's a lot of technicalities that people are gonna miss.
yeah, so you
Research.
you know, thinking through all the details and how they kind of relate, you know, how they relate to one another, um, is 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 tricky. Knowing why people did various things and how they, you know, how they did whatever they did, um, is important. But a lot of it's just, you know, a lot of it's just logic. It's like you kind of look at everything and question it and make sure you've got it, you know, kind of make sure you've got it right. And for some reason, unlike many other genres, the Western gets out of control super fast.
That's so interesting. I wonder if it's built up on just there's enough people who are like, oh, I've seen a John Wayne movie. I got
Yep.
this.
Right.
Like, just put me in, coach. I'm going to write it.
It's
It's going to be great. And then you're like, dude,
totally right.
what happened to the research part? Like, why did you not do that? Yeah, that's really
And
interesting.
they're overexposed and they don't respect it.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of the two. And you know, certain kinds of things, you hopefully you know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
it's very common that know what you don't know thing kind of gets out of you know, out of control
Yeah.
in Westerns.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Hopefully one day we can get that adaptation that people, that you could say that was the correct Louis L'Amour adaptation.
Yeah. That was
Maybe
the,
Yeah.
Peter Berg himself, because American Primeval was pretty sweet. And
I only saw a little bit of it, and I, I fear that it actually may have interrupted a television series I was trying to get off the ground. I didn't know that it
Oh.
existed. I
I
mean,
hate it.
obviously once it came out, I knew. But I had an interesting interaction with a very well known screenwriter who I will allow to remain nameless, but a couple of years ago, and we were working on Bendigo Shafter.
I love that book.
And we never got to the point where the deal. We were just kind of going back and forth with ideas, and it has a lot of similarities to American Primeval in some aspects.
Right.
I think this writer who showed a significant amount of caution when it came to other details. Like, I saw a detail in this movie, so there's no way I would ever use it here. And I was kind of going, that's a pretty small detail. But I think they may have learned about American Primeval and bailed on that because they vanished without a trace,
That's
kind
tough,
of in the
man.
middle of it, doing things. Oh,
Yeah.
I got a thing I got to tell you about.
Please.
Deal.
Okay, so this is hysterical because again, it's like right up your alley. Wild controversy. You guys are somewhat familiar with the Diamond of Jeru
Yeah.
story. Okay, so there's a true men's adventure magazine short story that my dad wrote, and then there's the novella that I adapted from that that was published first. With the men's adventure version was not published first, and then I adapted it into a movie, and then adapted it into an audio play.
Which is
So-
superb, might I
Oh,
add.
Thank you. When we were doing the movie, so the movie starred Keith Carradine and Billy Zane, and you know, Billy Zane's the adventurer type character. And first day of shooting, we're in this scene that's like the oil fields, and he comes like riding up on a truck, And at this point, Billy Zane has very little hair. And so he uses a variety of hair pieces that he's very good at managing. But I didn't realize this until we did this. The hair pieces don't last very long. They stretch, okay? And so they really need to be continually recreated. And or he just shaves his head or something. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but he likes the head shave thing, but he doesn't like to perform that way. As a civilian, he's a guy with a shaved head. As a performer, he's not.
Very interesting.
And yeah, no, it's an interesting choice. So anyway, we started shooting with him. We were in Australia. We made the movie in Australia. He was already working on a film in Australia. I think he had a piece with him which we needed to start before we got like the great hair pieces done. And so he had one that we kind of resculpted, but it wasn't terrific. And so we put a fedora on him. Okay, so day one, he comes riding up into like the oil field scene, and he's got this, and he's wearing this fedora. When those dailies showed up in LA, absolute panic. Okay, the people at the network, they were like, oh, the terror. It's like Harrison Ford owns the fedora. No one else but Indiana Jones can wear a fedora. And I'm sitting in Australia, and we start getting phone calls and emails and stuff. And I'm like, this is like a style of hat that was like popular for like 70 years.
Right. Like, it's not remarkable that Indy wears a fedora. Everyone was wearing them back then.
Right. But I mean, if you put on a fedora and walk down on the street today, somebody will walk up to you. What do you think you are, Indiana Jones? It's sort of like that. That thing just dominated, and and oh my God, it was such heartache trying to figure out what would happen, and we had to get him in a hat,
right?
Until we got the good hair, we had to get him in a hat, and so we eventually kind of went with like one of those old kind of
like a steamboat hat, right?
Yeah, kind of
like
captain's
a
hat.
Greek fisherman type of hat.
Yeah, sort of Humphrey Bogart, African Queen.
Yeah, exactly.
Hat.
Kind of like a Ponga Jim hat, almost.
Kind of like a Ponga Jim hat, absolutely. And that worked out. That worked out okay. But wow, you could not believe the explosion of angst over the fedora. It was amazing.
That's
and
crazy.
What was really too bad was he looked great in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I'm sure we were robbed, dude.
We were robbed with the fedora version of the movie. I want the fedora cut.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, before it gets like ridiculously long, which it already has, as long as you've heard that, is there you want to like bang some questions at me like coming out of Diamond of Giroux, because like I'm probably the only person in the world that has adapted the same story into like 3 different mediums.
Yeah.
That's really cool. My first question is, this right here is it's embarrassingly messed up, my copy of the volume 4 of the short story collection. Is it in there? I can't remember.
I think it is, yeah.
I think it is too, because I think I read it and then I listened to it about a month ago on your suggestion, actually. And it is a great story. I really like, some of the Ponga Jim stories, I think one of them maybe it's like the Well of the Unholy Light, I think has some treasure hunting stuff in it. I can't remember, because there's like 8 of them or something, and I read them back to back when I read this, and I've revisited them. But it's cool to have, because like you said before, when you talked about this in The Lost Treasures, he has treasure as like a plot device in a lot of things. And I remember you remarking in the book, you're like, but he didn't really he was never really interested in treasure in his personal life. Like, he was good to go. And I think you were saying that it's like, that is the thing that people would kind of fantasize back in the day. It's like, oh man, if we could just find the cowboy gold. We'll be rich and we'll be able to make it out of here. So it was cool to have it outside of a Western and actually sending him to Indonesia. And I love that. I mean, I'm actually currently working on right now my series character, Nate Colt, has a whole arc where he goes after he finds out terrible news when he's a younger guy. He goes and becomes a pearl diver in Indonesia and then gets caught up in pirates and the mafia and stuff like that. But it's all inspired because of stuff like the Diamond of Jeru and stuff like Panga Jim. I think Panga Jim was a skin diver in Indonesia. So I don't know. Indonesia is just such a rich place that I know way too little about to be writing about, but I got to write about it there because it's the coolest.
Yeah. I have only created fake versions of it. I've never been there.
Yeah.
I saw New Guinea or the clouds over New Guinea from a really, 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 really far north spot in Australia.
Very cool.
But that's as close as I've ever gotten.
Yeah, I mean, that story is just so rich. I guess one thought that I kind of had is it seemed like that was a real kind of, and this is like minor spoilers if you haven't read it, the idea of the guides having the diamond and being like, oh, yeah, you can find stuff like this all over the place, and then taking them in and basically stealing all of their stuff. Be like, sorry, no diamond. This was my diamond. We're getting out of here. Do you know like how is that something? It just seems too good of an idea to pass up. It has to be based in some sort of fact.
Yeah, I actually think that was something that maybe the Paiutes in Nevada did to some of the early settlers,
Oh,
not with
wow.
diamonds, but
Yeah.
you know, sort of like we'll take you to some special place or place where there's water or a place where there's gold or some, I don't know what it was, but I do believe that particular idea grew out of my dad's Western research. And
cool.
of course, a well fixed expedition by people who are compared to the locals extremely wealthy.
Right.
It's a lot. It's a lot of stuff,
Right.
and so that that made a certain amount of sense. I'll tell you an interesting thing. So if you the character of the characters of Enghai and Kabir, sort of the two bad guy Borneo natives, are not really in the original.
Okay.
Not Enghai. Enghai's a good guy. So there's Kabir and Jeru, who are the two bad guys. So Jeru's obviously in the original. Kabir's sort of.
And that's his like grandson or son or something, right?
Yeah, and we kind of changed it. Oh, so here's a fun filmmaking story. You'll like this. I just keep doing these digressions, and that's why we're over 3 hours. But I'm loving it. Probably cut this into 2 pieces.
This is what it's all about. I don't know. Maybe we need to give it to him straight.
So anyway, well, we have the part where I'm there, and we have the part where I'm not. But we hired this wonderful Indian guy. He wasn't really an actor, but he was this kind of little, I'm going to say old, but he wasn't really that old. He just looked like it.
All right.
Bald-headed guy who just looked kind of impossibly evil to play Jeru in the movie, and he was some kind of martial arts master. All right, and so he had the capacity to do a lot of these things without us having to have a stuntman for like every move and everything. And a couple of days into shooting, the director came up to me and he said, we've been working on the schedule for these last couple of days, and I cannot get more than 2 days to shoot the fight between Kardec and Jeru.
Oh man!
And the fight was written. It's a machete duel, and there's all kinds of detail in there about how Jeru is old and not so big, but he's very good at what he does. And hopefully, I wrote it kind of well. I was a fencer. I kind of know what I'm talking about.
Very cool.
And,
Sweet.
He says, I've got 2 days to shoot this fight, and there is no way I can get the detail that shows that he's really good in those 2 days. It's going to be Billy Zane, 6 feet tall, beating up a little old man. And he's just like, I have this idea, but I wanted to clear it with you. And which was very nice because most of the time you're the writer and you're there and they're like, just shut up. But I have this thing I want to do and I want to clear it with you. And I was like, what it is? He goes, I'm going to let this guy go. We're going to pay him off. And I'm going to hire the biggest, scariest dude I can get my hands on. He goes, I'm going to hire somebody who is like a cartoon for frightening. And we hired like this 6'6", 350-pound Maori guy. Okay.
Man.
He was just the sweetest guy in the whole world. But, he was a 350-pound, 6'6" Maori guy.
Yeah.
and we got the fight shot in 2 days, but that's the kind of thing. A lot of times people go, what went wrong with this movie? Why was it not this? Why was it not that? You have to make those decisions.
Yeah.
And so there's that was kind of an interesting thing. Anyway, the thing that I was going to say about the evolution of this story is it started out with Giroux just being kind of evil and just trying to take people for their possessions, and that perpetuated through the movie. And then so the short story was about 12 pages that my dad wrote. You can find it in the Off the Mangrove Coast collection,
Okay, cool.
in the Lost Treasures version of Off the Mangrove Coast. And then there's the novella that I did, which is the most well-distributed version of the story, which is about 90 pages.
Okay.
And then there was the movie, which had to be 89 pages to the page, because that's the format, 89 pages, 8 acts for a TV movie on that particular network.
Wow.
And then the audio is 180 minutes.
Wow.
Okay, rather than 89 minutes. So each time it kind of expanded. It expanded for the novella, and then I added I added scenes with the Lacklands. So the story in the film is split between John and Helen Lackland, the people who are being taken advantage of,
Right.
and the hero who's pursuing them to try and save them. And then in the audio, the third thing that's added is more and more stories about the Borneo natives.
Right.
And there was this wonderful moment where, as I was doing that, I was sort of like, well, this is all great, but it's like, I'd really like to do something that kind of opened your eyes to what was going on. I was sort of like, oh my God, Enghai, the good native who's like our Kardec's sidekick's grandfather, and is this kind of beneficent kind of figure. He created Giroux.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was like, if I want to do something that really takes this thing and takes that whole story and right there at the end, like puts this great turn on it. It's like, is Giroux evil for all he's doing? Is he like taking heads and stealing stuff because he's just a bad guy? Or is he taking heads for the magic because Enghai cursed him?
Yeah.
Okay. And
That's too
it's
good.
like, when you hit something like that, I mean, that was such a rush.
Right.
Oh, that was such a storytelling thing where sort of like, okay, I got a fairly good story, but it's sort of like that just was sort of like, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I
too cool.
love finding elements in stories where the characters do it to themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So Enghai did it to himself. If you look earlier in the story, John Lackland does it to himself.
Right.
Okay, he's got a perfectly good expedition planned. He decides he's going to get jealous. Okay,
Yeah, dude,
he
make him
does,
out
it
of
to, he
molehills.
does it to himself. It's sort of like if you find that moment, it's often like a real key to getting something, really, really delivering something great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's too cool.
Such great stories. Of all the different adaptations of it, which one do you feel like you got it? Like that's the one that is the story how I wanted it. Like which one, I guess, had the closest. So
Again, there's pieces. So I when I did the audio, I got the chance to do everything I couldn't do in the movie.
Yeah.
Nice.
So when we did the movie, I had not 3 scenes in Longhouses, but 2. So as you go in it, there is Enghai's Longhouse where they pick up Enghai. They're going upriver with Raj and Kardec are going upriver, and they pick up. I'm trying to make this make sense for anybody who doesn't know the story who's listening. So the hero and his buddy are going upriver, and they stop off and they pick up his grandfather, who's going to kind of help them find the hideout of the notorious pirate Giroux. And then they get to a longhouse that's been abandoned because many years before Giroux raided it. Okay, so this is a they're getting closer to the problem.
Right.
And then they get to finally to Giroux's longhouse. But we get around to the movie and they're like, you get one longhouse. Okay. This is a $4 million movie. You get one longhouse.
You got to shoot it from 3 different angles.
Well, I was hoping, but we didn't do that. Anyway, so what happens is obviously in an audio, budget is like not a consideration.
Right.
Anything I say is there, it's there.
Right.
So I really like the audio for qualities like that, and for qualities like we were just talking about, the thing with Enghai. But I'm not, because it had to be 180 minutes to make the publisher's requirement.
Yeah.
I stretch things a little bit, and I think it starts a little slow. Okay, I like the beginning of the movie better
Interesting.
for that kind of thing.
Interesting.
It's also very difficult. I got the opportunity because I was there when we were shooting. I could walk the streets of Maruti.
That's too cool.
Okay, which was like an old. It was a factory for rolling stock for railroads in Queensland. And we had it also with all these big kind of warehouse buildings and stuff. And it's like I could walk the streets of Maruti. I could go to the Maruti waterfront. And I mean, we had like 300 yards of riverfront, like also in Queensland, like set up like, the little port for Maruti. It's like
cool.
I could sit all night with nobody around in Kardec's bungalow, which we built from scratch, and was just totally freaking cool. Okay, so I don't know that I don't even have to like the movie to say those things. It's like the experience of some of it was so rich, and it also contributed to doing the audio. On the other hand, writing the novella was really exciting because I didn't know anything about it. If you go on our website to the Diamond of Giroux part of the website, so if you go to louislamour.com, you'll see this additional websites. You can go to Diamond of Giroux, and in one of the pieces of that website, you'll see, and you might find this interesting because you're going to do some writing about this particular area. You'll see some great books on Borneo.
Okay, cool.
And there was one of them, and unfortunately, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it just kept giving and giving and giving so cool. and giving. It was nuts.
That's amazing.
If you, offline when we're done with this, I don't want to bore everybody to death. If you have questions about pearl diving, it's a thing that I know something about.
Awesome.
I spent quite a bit of time in Broome, Australia, where that was the main industry for a long time. And I would be perfectly happy to tell you whatever I know about that.
All right, deal.
Yeah, so kind with your time here.
Yeah.
We appreciate it so much. We don't want to take any more of your time, so we should ask we have a final segment questions that I'll let Daniel ask you. But yeah, this is how we can cap it off because you've been more than kind.
Yeah,
Let's
well,
do it.
we would love to have you on again if you're ever interested. Not
this
for
has been a ride.
anybody's sake, but for our own. Just hearing you talk. I can't believe it's been 3 hours. It's been so much fun. The wealth. I mean, you've forgotten more about this genre than we'll ever know.
Yeah.
It's incredible. But the questions are, and we're putting you on the spot. What is your favorite book of all time, and who is your favorite character? And it does not have to be genre specific.
Yeah,
Any media.
Wow.
I know.
yeah. The hardest question we'd always throw.
You want another 3 hours?
Yeah. I mean, to tell you the truth, I think we might have already talked about it. I'm a big fan of Eye of the Tiger by Wilbur Smith.
Wow. Very cool.
And I'm not. I also like that character. I'm not sure that I probably could come up with something better at some point, but I like that character because he's kind of he's a somewhat reformed thief, and he's a pretty tough character, and yet he still kind of gets taken advantage of, and he kind of gives in to like very romantic impulses, and he's a terrific character. And if you're talking about stories in your specific genre, I'm going to say I'm a big fan of that. I don't read anywhere near as much fiction as I used to. There's nonfiction is you're never taking a risk. It can be badly written, but the information is always there. So sort of like you can't lose with nonfiction. And so a lot of my reading has been because of that, and because the project I just got off required me to study physics and finance and
Very cool.
and scuba diving and just all kinds of stuff that I didn't know anything about. And so I haven't done an awful lot of reading in the last couple of years when it comes to fiction.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
So,
totally fair. I mean, you're too busy writing it, and I am
yeah.
incredibly excited for this book to come out whenever it does come out.
As well.
Yeah, thanks for telling us a little bit about it on the podcast. That's so exciting.
yeah, well, it won't be less than a year. Publishing, traditional publishing moves very slowly as opposed to what you guys do, which can move as fast as you want it to, which is so great.
We are excited. Thank you so much for this experience. I mean, this is
All right, so your wives will probably kill me and everything. But
Funnily enough, my wife was like, "You'll be done by 9:10," and she was just making a joke. It would be a 10-minute podcast, and I said, "I'm fully expecting to stay awake until 1 a.m. this morning." She said, "You're gonna have a 4-hour podcast?" Little did I know, we were close. So she was prepared.
we're definitely in Joe Rogan territory.
Yeah, this is super
Well,
fun.
if any episode deserved it, it was this. We were just beyond honored to have you on, and it, like Luke said, I mean, I was thinking about it today, thinking about you coming on. I don't think there's a single episode where we did not talk about Louis L'Amour. This is the 48th or 49th, something like that, somewhere around there. So we have said multiple times this is the unofficial Louis L'Amour podcast. So to have you on is like a dream come true for both of us. So thank you so much.
I gotta say, it's also a dream come true to be on a podcast with you guys, because one of the things, no matter what I start to talk about, I'm always confident that you got context.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's sort of like, yeah, these guys will all, I mean, regardless of how weird things get, it's like somehow they'll probably know what I'm talking about.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know that's why when me and Nathaniel met each other, it was like that. I was like, wait, you've also read every men's adventure fiction book around? That's fantastic. Finally, someone speaks my language.
Yeah, that's too
awesome.
cool. Oh, thank you so much, and thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back again soon, but I think you got a lot to chew on after this episode. This is gonna. I mean, I'm gonna have to listen to this probably 3 or 4 times just to
Take some notes myself.
I know.
Listen to it real close.
Yeah, too cool.
Thank you guys. Take care.
This damn cowpoke. He's too good at covering his tracks.
Makes you kind of worry a feller has a reason to be good at covering his tracks.
Oh, be sure he does. I rode with Cab Harris once. He is one mean hombre.
No man's fast enough to shoot that many.
lickety split with those 6 guns he is.
The only man I've seen who might have a chance against Cab is Lance. Those banditos won't get that man.
But we will.
I will.